The wind howled around her as she stood at the edge of the cliff, the rocky ground trembling beneath her feet. Her chest tightened, each breath shallow and rapid, as if the very air around her had conspired to make her hesitate. Below, the valley stretched endlessly, a quiet abyss that seemed to mock her. In that suspended moment, she felt the weight of every choice she had ever avoided, every truth she had buried beneath layers of comfort and distraction. Fear was not just in her mind, it was in her bones, in her blood, in the trembling of her hands. Yet she knew, with an unshakable clarity, that freedom could not exist without this confrontation. Most people live their lives as if freedom is something external. They believe that the right job, the right relationship, or the right circumstances will finally release them from the invisible chains that bind their spirit. We chase comfort, stability, and predictability, telling ourselves that these are the keys to happiness. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the distractions fade and the excuses fall away, we sense the truth. Freedom is not found in the absence of fear, but in the courage to face it. Until we do, we remain prisoners of an invisible force, trapped in a life half-lived, dancing on the edges of possibility without ever stepping fully into it. Psychologists and philosophers alike have long understood this tension between illusion and reality. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, the uncomfortable truths we hide even from our own consciousness. This shadow is not a villain, it is the gateway. Within it lies the very source of vitality, authenticity, and self-knowledge. It is where fear dwells, and fear, left unchecked, governs our lives with subtle tyranny. We avoid it, we suppress it, we rationalize it, and in doing so, we trade our deepest potential for fleeting comfort. Nietzsche would remind us that to live fully is to embrace the chaos within, to confront the storms that make us quiver, and to emerge on the other side stronger, wiser, more real. Imagine standing in front of a door that you know you must open. On the other side waits the life you long for, freedom, clarity, purpose. But the door is heavy, and you sense every hidden fear pressing against it. What will happen if you open it? What if you fail? What if you are rejected? What if the very thing you desire is not what you expect? The mind screams reasons to turn away, to retreat, to preserve the illusion of safety. This is the paradox of fear. It promises protection, yet it steals life itself. Each step backward is a surrender. Each hesitation a compromise with the unknown that will cost you more than you realize. And yet, within that tension lies possibility. The moment before you act, the heartbeat before the leap, is charged with the potential of transformation. It is cinematic in its intensity, a pause pregnant with meaning, a quiet invitation to face what you have long denied. This is not a call to reckless bravery, but to conscious courage. The decision to stand with your fear, to observe it, to acknowledge its presence without letting it dictate the terms of your existence. In that moment, freedom begins not as a distant dream, but as a tangible, lived experience. Fear is intimately familiar. It whispers in moments of solitude, rises in times of uncertainty, and constricts the heart when we are confronted with the unknown. Most people attempt to dull its edge with distraction, scrolling through endless feeds, immersing themselves in work, clinging to routines that anesthetize the spirit. But fear is patient, and it cannot be escaped. It waits quietly in the shadows, ready to claim your vitality the moment you ignore it. The truth is unsettling. Until you confront it, freedom is an illusion, a mirage shimmering on the horizon of your life. Yet, confronting fear is not a singular heroic act. It is a series of small, deliberate choices. It is waking up in the morning and choosing authenticity over pretense. It is speaking your truth when silence feels safer. It is taking that first trembling step toward the unknown, even when every instinct tells you to run. Jung would say that this is where individuation begins, the process of becoming whole by integrating the shadow into conscious life. Nietzsche would call it self-overcoming, the act of forging strength and wisdom through engagement with life's inevitable trials. And Viktor Frankl would insist that meaning is born precisely in the space where we refuse to be paralyzed by fear, where we turn toward suffering rather than away from it. This cinematic moment on the cliff is a metaphor for life itself. Every person carries cliffs within them, fears that seem insurmountable, choices that feel impossible, truths that are too painful to face. Standing there, on the precipice, you have a choice: to turn back into the comfort of the familiar, or to step forward into the unknown. The first step is never easy. It is trembling. It is doubt. It is the quiet, persistent voice of fear saying, "You cannot." And yet, it is also the moment where everything changes. Because, until you confront that fear, freedom remains a dream. And so, we begin this journey together, standing at the threshold of the self we have long avoided. The path is not without terror, but it is rich with potential. It asks only that we notice the fear, name it, and allow it to teach us. The wind still whips around us, the ground still trembles, but something new stirs within. The realization that the edge is not the end. It is a beginning, a possibility, a door. And beyond that door lies the freedom that has always been waiting, quietly, patiently, for the courage to arrive. Fear is a master we seldom recognize. It is subtle, patient, and insidious, shaping our decisions without our conscious awareness. At first, it appears protective. Evolution designed fear to keep us alive, to alert us to danger, to guard against harm, to preserve the body from the threats of the external world. Yet, the mind does not distinguish between real and imagined danger, between actual threats and imagined catastrophes. And so, fear becomes a double-edged sword. It saves us physically, but it imprisons us psychologically. Every time we avoid discomfort, every time we sidestep the unknown, fear grows stronger, cementing its dominion over our lives. Viktor Frankl, reflecting on the depths of human suffering, observed that avoidance creates meaninglessness. When we flee from our fears, we also flee from our purpose. Life, Frankl insisted, does not offer meaning to those who shrink from confrontation. True significance emerges when we dare to meet the unknown, to step into experiences that challenge our assumptions and confront our deepest anxieties. Nietzsche echoes this sentiment. Life's richness demands confrontation with chaos. To deny fear is to deny existence itself. And in that denial, we trade authenticity for illusion, settling for a life half-lived because it feels safer than the uncertainty of transformation. Fear is not only a personal struggle, it is universal. Every human being encounters the same internal battles: the fear of rejection, failure, loss, and even self-exposure. Society compounds these fears, teaching avoidance and distraction. From a young age, we are conditioned to seek security, to follow paths that promise comfort, and to suppress the discomfort of our true emotions. We are told that success is measured by control, controlling outcomes, controlling perception, controlling life itself. Yet this illusion of control is precisely what limits freedom. Jung called attention to this tension. The shadow, the unacknowledged parts of ourselves, grows stronger when ignored. What we resist, he said, persists. Avoidance feeds fear, and the more we attempt to master life externally, the more we remain internally captive. Imagine a person standing in a crowded room, paralyzed by the thought of speaking their truth. Every word is weighed, every expression calculated, every potential judgment imagined. The fear of vulnerability binds them to silence. On the surface, life appears manageable. There is comfort in the avoidance, no embarrassment, no confrontation, no risk. But internally, energy drains away, possibilities diminish, and the soul shrinks under the pressure of unspoken truths. This is the paradox of fear. It offers safety, but it demands a surrender of our most vital potential. And yet, confronting fear transforms it. The first step is acknowledgement, seeing fear clearly, naming it, and understanding its origin. This is not an act of heroism. It is an act of clarity. To stand before fear and observe it without judgment is to reduce its power. The cinematic imagery here is crucial. Visualize a storm raging inside, dark clouds swirling with doubt and anxiety. Confronting fear is stepping into that storm, feeling the wind and rain on your face, yet refusing to retreat. Jungian psychology teaches that integrating the shadow, the unacknowledged aspects of self, is the path to wholeness. The shadow contains fear, yes, but it also contains vitality, creativity, and strength. To confront fear is to reclaim these hidden parts of ourselves. Nietzsche called this process self-overcoming. Life, he argued, is not meant to be comfortable. Growth is forged in tension, in struggle, in deliberate engagement with what challenges us. Every act of courage, no matter how small, expands the horizon of possibility. Each confrontation with fear becomes a brick in the foundation of a freer, more authentic existence. We begin to see the illusions we have built around ourselves, the facade of safety, the mirage of control, and we recognize them for what they are: barriers constructed to keep us small. Fear also exists in the interplay between internal and external worlds. Externally, the world presents risks, failure, judgment, disappointment. Internally, the mind magnifies these risks, replaying scenarios, imagining outcomes, and amplifying anxiety. The gap between perception and reality becomes the battlefield where fear thrives. By observing this dynamic, we gain insight into its mechanics. The external threat is rarely as formidable as the internal one. Most of our suffering is generated by anticipation, by avoidance, and by the constant effort to manipulate outcomes we cannot control. Frankl's wisdom reminds us that meaning arises not from the absence of fear, but from the conscious choice to move toward what matters despite it. Consider the cinematic rhythm of this revelation. The camera pans inward into the mind, capturing flashes of imagined horrors, whispered self-doubt, and past regrets. Then it cuts outward, showing small acts of defiance, a hand raised, a word spoken, a step forward. These moments illustrate a profound truth. The power of fear is proportional to the power we give it. When fear is observed, acknowledged, and engaged with, it transforms from an oppressor into a guide, a signal pointing us toward growth and freedom. Throughout history, countless examples reinforce this principle. Ordinary people who confront their fears in daily life, not for glory or recognition, but for the quiet reclamation of self, demonstrate that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Even small confrontations, asking difficult questions, expressing vulnerability, leaving a toxic situation, create momentum. Each act accumulates, each step forward reduces the internal tyranny of fear. Nietzsche's vision of the overman, the one who continuously overcomes, is mirrored in these everyday struggles. Freedom is incremental, discovered in the conscious decision to face the unknown. The lesson of this section is clear. Fear is both inevitable and malleable. It is a force to be recognized, respected, and confronted. By understanding its mechanics, the interplay between biological instinct, psychological patterns, and societal conditioning, we can approach fear with intention rather than surrender. The cinematic metaphor continues. The storm within us can be navigated, its power harnessed, its lessons learned. Each confrontation opens a door to a new dimension of freedom, a space where courage, authenticity, and meaning coexist. And as we prepare to step into the transformation, the realization crystallizes. Avoiding fear ensures stagnation, while engaging with it allows the emergence of the self that has long been waiting. Freedom is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of courage. Each fear faced is a victory, each step forward an expansion of possibility. The stage is set for the next chapter, the emotional and existential breakthrough that comes when we finally walk into the storm and claim the freedom that has always been ours to take. The moment arrives quietly, almost imperceptibly. It begins not with a roar, but with a tremor, the subtle shift inside, the faint pulse that signals readiness. The storm that has raged in the mind, the tempest of fear and doubt, is still present, but something has changed. The individual no longer seeks to escape. The hands may shake, the heart may hammer, the breath may come in short gasps, but the decision has been made. To stand still no longer feels like survival. It feels like surrender. The first act of courage is simple yet profound, moving forward despite the trembling, stepping into the unknown with eyes wide open. Cinematic imagery captures this transformation vividly. Imagine a figure walking through a dense fog, each step uncertain, the path ahead obscured. With every step, the mist begins to part, revealing glimpses of possibility. Light filtering through trees, a distant valley of clarity. The sound of wind that feels like invitation rather than threat. The mind protests, conjuring worst-case scenarios, replaying failures, and imagined disasters. Yet action overrides imagination. Nietzsche's idea of self-overcoming is embodied in these small, deliberate steps. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. Each step becomes a declaration that the self refuses to be confined by invisible chains. This transformation is both psychological and existential. On one level, fear begins to lose its dominion. The internal dialogue that once screamed, "You cannot," now softens. The intensity of dread diminishes, replaced by a sense of agency, a feeling that the individual is reclaiming something fundamental that was always theirs: their life, their choices, their freedom. Viktor Frankl's insight resonates here. Meaning is discovered in the act of engagement, not avoidance. By confronting fear, the individual finds not only courage, but purpose. The act itself, walking into what terrifies, is the crucible in which selfhood is forged. The cinematic rhythm is crucial. Short, staccato sentences convey the tension. Heart pounds. Feet move. Breath catches. Silence. The pause allows the audience to feel the weight of the moment, the gravity of choosing authenticity over avoidance. Then comes a surge, a step forward, a word spoken, a confession offered. Each act of engagement transforms the landscape of the mind. The valley of doubt begins to recede. The horizon expands. The internal storm does not vanish. It cannot. But it is no longer a tyrant. It becomes a companion, a teacher, a reminder of the strength that arises when we refuse to retreat. Stories of ordinary courage illuminate the principle. A person finally confronts a long-avoided conversation, speaking truth to a loved one. Another faces the fear of public exposure, presenting their work, revealing their vision, vulnerable yet unyielding. Even small actions, a decision to leave a toxic environment, to pursue a passion despite uncertainty, carry monumental significance. Nietzsche's Overman is not a mythical figure, but a living reality in these moments. Each act of conscious courage chips away at the barriers erected by fear, expanding the realm of what is possible. Cinematic tension continues through contrasts. The darkness of fear juxtaposed against the light of clarity. The heaviness of doubt set against the liberation of action. The narrative emphasizes sensation, the heat of adrenaline, the tightness of the chest, the racing of thoughts. These bodily experiences are inseparable from the psychological shift occurring simultaneously. Courage is embodied, lived through the senses as much as the mind. To witness this on screen, the audience feels it. The tension becomes tangible, almost palpable. This section also emphasizes emotional subtlety. Courage is rarely dramatic or heroic in the conventional sense. It is intimate, quiet, and often invisible to the outside world. Yet its effects are profound. Every confrontation with fear strengthens resilience, sharpens perception, and expands consciousness. Each encounter teaches that the limits we imagined were imposed not by reality, but by the mind's protective strategies. By walking through the fire, the individual discovers the elasticity of self. That which seemed fragile can endure, that which seemed limited can grow, that which seemed impossible can be achieved. Philosophical insights interweave seamlessly. Jung's shadow is confronted and integrated. The previously hidden aspects of self are acknowledged, understood, and reclaimed. Nietzsche's self-overcoming is enacted in real time, a living demonstration of the principle that life's challenges are the raw material of growth. Frankl's search for meaning finds fulfillment in the act itself. The courage to move forward is simultaneously the creation of purpose. The interplay between these ideas is not abstract. It is experienced viscerally, emotionally, through the cinematic lens of lived reality. The climax of this section is not a dramatic victory, but a profound internal revelation. The figure on the cliff, in the fog, in the quiet room of confrontation, pauses. Breath steadies. Heart slows. For the first time, fear is no longer the master. The individual senses freedom, raw, immediate, lived. The realization is simple yet transformative. Freedom is not granted. It is claimed. It is not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage, the willingness to act despite uncertainty. The cinematic arc reaches its emotional apex as the transformation ripples outward. Small actions begin to compound, ripple through daily life, and redefine what was once possible. Relationships, work, creativity, and self-perception are all subtly altered by the courage to confront fear. The audience, immersed in the narrative, experiences vicariously the profound sense of liberation that arises when we stop fleeing and begin facing. Silence punctuates the moment, allowing the weight of insight to settle, giving space for reflection and absorption. As this section concludes, the narrative leaves the audience at the threshold of integration. The internal storm has not vanished, but it has been tamed. Fear is no longer a barrier, but a companion, a guide, a teacher. The cinematic metaphor persists. The fog parts, the valley opens, the horizon stretches. The figure stands taller, steadier, alive with the knowledge that each future confrontation will be met with the same courage, each fear addressed with clarity. Transformation has occurred, not as a spectacle, but as a deeply human, intimate, and profound shift. The transition line prepares for the final section, integration into everyday life. In the silence after fear, a new freedom is born, waiting to be woven into the rhythm of life itself. The storm has passed, but its echoes remain, lingering in the quiet spaces of the mind. Standing at the cliff's edge, the wind calmer now, the individual senses a profound shift. The fear that once seemed insurmountable, the confrontation with the unknown, has been faced, and in facing it, a new clarity emerges. Freedom is no longer a distant idea or a fleeting dream. It is a lived experience, a state of being forged in courage and conscious engagement. Life has not necessarily changed externally, yet everything within has transformed. Ordinary moments now carry depth and resonance, each decision infused with presence and meaning. True freedom is not a single act of heroism, but a continuous practice, repeated in the small, intimate choices of daily life. Every day presents new cliffs, the fear of rejection, failure, loss, or uncertainty. The cliff is not merely a metaphor. It is a recurring invitation to step forward despite hesitation. Each conscious act of courage, speaking truth when silence is safer, expressing vulnerability when concealment feels easier, choosing meaning over distraction, threads freedom into the fabric of life. Jung's insight reminds us that integration of the shadow is ongoing. Every encounter with fear is an opportunity to reclaim hidden aspects of ourselves, to expand our inner landscape, and to cultivate wholeness. Modern life constantly tempts us toward retreat. Comfort, distraction, and the illusion of control all offer temporary relief, but ultimately reinforce fear's dominion. Courage, however, is found in consistency, not spectacle. Viktor Frankl's philosophy illuminates this. Meaning is created not by avoiding suffering or uncertainty, but by moving toward what matters most despite it. Each deliberate choice to act in alignment with truth chips away at fear, incrementally expanding the horizon of what is possible. Ordinary acts, starting difficult conversations, pursuing long-suppressed passions, or simply taking responsibility for one's life, become profound exercises in self-liberation. Philosophical wisdom converges in this daily practice. Nietzsche's concept of self-overcoming manifests, not in grandiose achievements, but in these intimate confrontations. Jung's shadow, once feared and denied, transforms into a reservoir of strength, creativity, and insight. Frankl's pursuit of meaning finds concrete expression through deliberate engagement. Freedom is revealed as the tangible consequence of consistently meeting fear with conscious courage. Cinematic imagery reinforces this vision. The cliff is no longer menacing. The wind no longer threatens but invigorates. The horizon stretches infinitely, inviting exploration and discovery. The final reflection is both poetic and enduring. Each fear faced is a key turned. Every deliberate step into the unknown opens a door. Freedom is not granted. It is claimed, moment by moment, through the quiet, steadfast courage of living fully. Life's richness is inseparable from the fears we dare to confront, and in confronting them, we reclaim not only our vitality, but our authenticity. The individual now understands that courage is not an isolated act, but the foundation of an engaged, meaningful life. The cliff, once a place of hesitation, has become a symbol of possibility. The wind, once a threat, now whispers encouragement. The horizon, once obscured, now stretches endlessly. And so, the journey concludes, but not in an ending. Freedom, like life itself, is a continuous process, a series of choices, a rhythm of courage, a practice of embracing the unknown with openness and clarity. Each encounter with fear offers a new lesson, a new opportunity to deepen authenticity, and a renewed chance to claim the life that was always ours to inhabit. In this integration, we discover the essence of living fully, the life we were always meant to lead.